This is just a quick video to discuss the 24-70mm f2.8 G Master lens. More specifically, I'll be discussing the Bokeh. I've had the opportunity to borrow this lens for a couple of days, and I'm in the middle of writing a review on it. And I went out last night just to do some test shots because I wanted to test certain things like the lens sharpness and have some interesting sample images to show that. And more specifically, I wanted to test the Bokeh. So as you can see, I've got two shots up here. Now, just to give you sort of a backstory of the test scenario, what I had with me at the time was a D800 and a 24-70mm f2.8 G lens, which is the first generation, and I had my A7R II with the 24-70 G Master mounted to that. And now some of you may be wondering why I didn't adapt the Nikon lens to this Sony body, and the reason why I chose not to is because the adapters that you use to adapt other lenses, sometimes there can be slight variances with them, and even if you're like half a millimeter off or so forth, it would affect the image quality. And on top of that, the adapters I've noticed have light leak. Now I own two. I own the Photo DX one, and I own a Comlight, and it's the autofocus one. It's the first one that got released, and I bought it, used it once or twice, realised it was absolutely useless to me really, and it's kind of just been sitting on the side, which I actually do need to sell at some point. Back to the test though. Because I use two different camera bodies, as you can see, the images are slightly different. The Nikon D800, which is the image on the right hand side, is slightly elevated, and that's because of the camera body and the way it sits on the tripod. Obviously the lens mount and to where the lens mount to where the tripod mount is slightly higher versus where it is on the A7R II, because the A7R II is a smaller body. So that aside, I've just generally focused around this area here when I got the two shots together, and focus there to get the maximum bokeh at 70mm at f2.8. I was on a tripod and I shot at 100, ISO 100, just to get the cleanest file. But now if I just get straight to it and zoom into the bokeh, so we can actually discuss what I noticed about it. And now both of them actually have bad bokeh attributes, and what I mean by that is the onioning effect. A lot of people talk about various bokeh, and some say this is bad bokeh, good bokeh, and whatnot. One of many things that people look out for is the bokeh balls and the onioning effect. And as you can see, both of them have it, but the Nikon has much more pronounced edges and is very harsh. Now, it's kind of like bokeh is a very subjective thing, and some people don't notice these things, some people do, some people like punchy, contrasty images and so forth. But technically speaking, bokeh should be smooth and have smooth transitions, and Sony is definitely winning on that part. But it still does have the onioning effect. Now when you go to the edges of the frame, you notice that the shapes of the bokeh balls aren't holding up very well on the Nikon. They're turning into rugby balls, whereas the Sony's holding on a bit better. The shape is distorting, I'm not going to deny that, but it's not as bad as the Nikon. And the Nikon even actually has pointed ends here, whereas the Sony obviously is holding on to its roundness a lot better. And as you can see, the edges are very harsh on these ones. So on that note, if I was just have a versus competition between these two lenses, the Sony would win on bokeh hands down. But that's not what I was testing. I was using the Nikon as a benchmark just because it's the lens I've been using in my professional career for the past 5 years, and I've never really had any major complaints with it. I kind of just used the lens, got the shots that I needed to get, never really complained about the bokeh, and that's because I consider the 24-70mm f2.8 a workhorse lens. It's not for me to create the most beautiful images with the most amount of bokeh. It's literally just to make sure I have a good enough lens to capture what I need to capture. So on that note, I was not excited about the G Master version of the 24-70 because it's not a lens I'm interested in, because I don't shoot my Sony professionally, so I don't need something just to capture what I needed to capture. I want to create beautiful images, and with the Sony I use the 35mm f1.4, which has amazing bokeh. What else do I use? The 55 1.8, amazing bokeh. The 85mm 1.4 G Master, amazing bokeh. So yeah, on that note, the 24-70 G Master just is not, I never looked at it as something that was supposed to have great bokeh. But when you bear in mind the fact that the Nikon lens is I'm not even too sure if I'm accurate in saying this, but it's probably like 10 years old now. It's cheap now, and because there's a version 2 out. The G Master is £1,800 UK, and it is. I would expect it to be so much better, but looking at it, it's not quite there. So I don't want to say it's got bad bokeh, but for its price, it definitely does. But as a 24-70mm lens, I think it does the job. I would love to be able to test the Canons, the Tamrons, and the Sigmas to see how their bokeh holds up in terms of the onion effect and so forth. But for the moment, just comparing the Nikon to the Sony wins, but the Sony doesn't win by much, and it's very expensive for what it is. But let me know your thoughts on what you think about the bokeh and what you think about the lens in general. Keep a lookout for the written review, should be up soon. And yeah, the link will be in the description below. And let me know what your thoughts are. Cheers. Bye.